In today's video, I'm going to help you take your self-sabotaging patterns and start to reveal the process to help you overcome it completely. So if you are somebody who you are a high achiever, you're an entrepreneur, but you feel like something is holding you back, and you're now kind of starting to become aware of what that is, but you're unsure of like how to completely work through that, then this is going to be a super helpful video for you. So a lot of the clients that I work with, they're high achievers, they're high performers and entrepreneurs, but sometimes they just feel like there's like a mental block or something that is getting in their way that prevents them from like fully stepping into their full potential. And if you're watching this, it's probably the case that there's something that's holding you back as well. And so this is something that first, I just want to say a lot of people, most people don't ever get to the point where they're challenged enough with the career that they're in or the situation that they're faced with that these fears and these doubts come up. Because let's be honest, most people are just comfortable. They're just kind of go through the motions, and they don't really put themselves in situations where they are challenged. But if you have these fears, if you have these mental blocks, then it typically means that you're expanding your identity, you're expanding your comfort zone, and that's why these things come up. So with that kind of as the setup, one other thing I want to mention is that I did a video a couple of days ago where I talked about how you can start to uncover what those patterns are. And what I told you to do is to go through a typical week and start to pay attention to the actions that you're taking and the times when that resistance or that self-doubt or that self-sabotage comes up, because that's what we want to do first. The first part is we want to start to recognize what are the patterns. So in this first example, this is where let's pretend that you have gone through your challenge and you've started to recognize that you have a self-sabotaging pattern of procrastination. And that procrastination pops up when it comes time to work on your business. So it could be that you're an aspiring entrepreneur and it's thinking about starting your business. It could be you're an existing entrepreneur and it's when you think about expanding or growing your business. Or it could be just you're a high achiever and you're working on a specific like new project or a new idea. And the pattern that you recognize is this procrastination. So that's great that you recognize that. So the next step is to recognize what is the fear that you have that is underlying the procrastination. So the fear for a lot of people can be failure. It can be failure. It can be a fear of success. It can be a fear of rejection, judgment, visibility, imposter syndrome, or complexity. But this is where I want you to actually understand like what is the fear, the underlying fear that's causing that pattern. Because once you start to recognize that fear, then you can start to identify what is the underlying belief that is causing that fear to show up. So this is an example of what that belief might be. You could be telling yourself this thought or this belief that this needs to be perfect before I post about it on social media. This business project, whatever it is, it needs to be perfect before I fully put it out there. Because what you're telling yourself when you say this is, if it's perfect, then I won't fail. And if I won't fail, then I won't, then others will see me as a success. So do you see how this pattern like starts to play out? Behind every pattern is typically a fear. Behind every fear is typically a belief. And we want to start to recognize what are the patterns, what are the fears, and what are the beliefs. So let me give you another example. So let's say that you recognize that you have this self-sabotaging pattern of knowing that you want to take the next step in your business, but you're avoiding the specific actions. So you know exactly what you want to do to take it to the next level, to grow, to make more money, to expand, to kind of increase your chances of getting promoted, let's say, but you're avoiding the specific steps. So if that's like the pattern that you recognize, what we want to do is start to understand what is the underlying fear. So for you, for a lot of people, it could be you have a fear of judgment from friends or family or current coworkers. Once you understand what that fear is, start to ask yourself, what is the belief that I have? The belief is my friends are going to judge me for creating my business. So this is like the first step that I want you to understand is once you understand the pattern, you can start to identify what are some of the fears that are coming up. And you typically will feel these fears like in your chest or in your stomach. You feel it like really in your body when you put yourself in these situations. Then start to become more aware of what are the beliefs that I have that are causing these fears that are ultimately causing the patterns. Because what we want to get to is when we understand these beliefs, that's when we can start to overcome them and question them. And the best way to do that is through this process right here. So this is like a little diagram that I drew up, which I'm going to explain. So you want to take your beliefs that you have and start to put them through a questioning process. Because most of the time, we never question our beliefs. We just believe them to be true. So what we want to do is we want to take some time and actually start to work through them. So here's how we can do that. The first thing, is this belief true? So if we're looking at the previous example of whatever I'm working on, it needs to be perfect before I post about it on social media. You might tell yourself, yes, it needs to be perfect before I post about it. If you tell yourself yes, the next question to ask yourself is this belief 100% true? Like you could say, you know what, it would be better, it would do better if it's perfect. It would increase my chances of success if it's perfect, but is it 100 like unequivocally true? If it's like typically when you ask yourself, is it 100% true? Then you'll realize that the answer actually is no. It doesn't actually need to be, it's not 100% true. And so once you kind of start to realize that, this belief that I have that is creating this fear and is causing this pattern, it's not true. It's not 100% true. So then what we do is if that's not true, we start to ask ourselves these questions. If this belief isn't true, then what is the opposite of it? So let me explain. So if it's not true that this needs to be perfect before I post about it on social media, then what's the opposite of this belief? The opposite of that belief is it doesn't need to be perfect before I post it on social media. And so you'll find that if this thing that is underlying all of our fears and our patterns isn't true, we want to start to build evidence for the opposite of it. And so the best way to do that is if it's not true, what's the opposite? We list it out. And then what we do is we ask ourselves, what evidence do you have for the opposite? So what evidence do you have for it doesn't need to be perfect before I post about it? What you could come up with is, and you typically want to try and come up with at least like 3 examples. I'll say 1 to 3. The more evidence that you have, the better to reinforce it. But you could come up with evidence that the posts that I relate to the most are the ones that are the most authentic. The more authentic something is to me, the better I'll feel about it and the more I'll connect with others. And so once you start to recognize that the opposite of what you believe is actually true, then the last step is to ask yourself this last question, which is, what's my next best action step? So you started with this thing up here that's underlying everything. You realized it's not 100% true. We've recognized the opposite of it. We've come up with evidence for it. And then now we can just ask ourselves, like, what's my next best step? So the next best step in this situation is I'm just going to spend like 10 more minutes on this, and then I'm going to click post. I'm going to spend 25 minutes on this, and then I'm going to click post. I'm going to get some feedback from my coworkers, my friends and family, and then I'm going to ship it. That is like what this process can look like. And I'll like to just reinforce this. I want to go through one more example of it with our other belief that we had. So let's pretend that we have this belief that my friends and family are going to judge me for starting my business. So I have heard this so many times. And honestly, this was one of the things that I had to overcome as well, is like I wasn't sure how friends and family and my coworkers were going to feel about me starting a business while I was working at another job, and I was on the leadership team, and I had a couple of people who were reporting to me, and I was one of the leaders. And so I just felt like, oh, if they see that I'm working on this other business, then maybe they'll think I'm not committed, or I won't be doing a good enough job in my current role. So you first want to identify what is the belief. Ask yourself, is it 100% true? To me, it's pretty obvious. No, it's not 100% true that they're going to judge me. And so then I ask myself, if it's not true, then what's the opposite? What's the opposite is my friends and family are going to be inspired by me starting my business. They'll love me no matter what. So they're not going to judge me. They're actually going to be inspired. They're going to be excited for me. They're going to want to support me. They're going to want to see me succeed. And so if that's true, then what is the opposite? We identify that. We come up with evidence. And we could say something like, we start to come up with evidence. And for me, it's like, my wife has always supported me. She's told me multiple times to go for it. I've heard like other people say, everyone else sees my potential. My friends and family, they see how capable I am. And you could even say something like, my friends or my guys will always have my back. And so once you come up with evidence for that, you ask yourself, what's the next best action step? And that next step is to commit to what this business is or what this project requires of me, and do my absolute best and take it to the next level. So I want you to kind of see how this process works and how you can uncover it, because it all starts with recognizing what is the pattern that you have, what are the fears, what are the beliefs, and then you can start to put it through this process and start to kind of question and recognize a lot of the beliefs that you have that are causing some of these fears and these patterns aren't 100% true. And I know that this might seem kind of complicated at first, but once you really go through this, maybe even pause and come back to this a couple of times to, start to question your beliefs. Because once you kind of go through this process, you're going to see all of these limiting beliefs everywhere. And you're going to see all of these thoughts like coming through your head that just aren't simply true. And when you have the tools to overcome them, then you become much more powerful, and you're much more likely to not have these mental blocks and these stories and these things that are holding you back. So that is kind of what I have for today. And your homework for this is to go through and try and identify all of your self-sabotaging patterns, list out the fears and list out the beliefs, and start to put them through this questioning process. Because once you overcome the things that are holding you back, you ultimately become unstoppable. So that's what I have for today. One other thing I wanted to mention is if you want to go through this process on a live coaching call, book a call in below or comment on this video, or you can send me a DM on Instagram and we can set that up and make that happen for you. So that's what I have for today. I'll see you all in the next one.